Dr. Santosh, can we start now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Dr. Pankaj, you can start.
Okay. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the third day of National Online Training on New Horizons of Canine Disease Diagnosis and Therapeutics, organized by the PGIBAS MAPSU Akola. Respected Associate Dean and Course Director Dr. EU Bikane sir, Course Coordinator Dr. Wagmare sir, my fellow colleagues Dr. Pazai sir, Dr. Ingole sir, dear participant wives. So, I request on this, I welcome on this platform Dr. Satish Kumar sir from Hyderabad and Dr. Rajendra Velankar sir from Mumbai. Friends, the field of veterinary cardiology is continuously expanding with the scientific studies. Papers arising each year that provide additional knowledge so a better quality of the care can be provided for our patients. Cardiac disease is commonly encountered in general veterinary practice and can account for approximately 25% of all the medical cases nowadays. With this view, the organizers decided to have a special day on canine cardiology. तो आज के लेक्चर्स बड़े दिल से सुनना है, दिल लगाकर सुनना है और दिल खोलकर स्पीकर्स को लाइक करके अपने सवाल पूछना है. तो दिल की बातों को लेकर आज हम बात करने जा रहे हैं कि डॉग्स में दिल की बीमारी का निदान कैसे करते हैं. सो टुडे वी हैव विद अस डॉक्टर सतीश कुमार सर फ्रॉम हैदराबाद. वेलकम सर. आई रिक्वेस्ट आवर कोर्स कोऑर्डिनेटर डॉक्टर वाघमारे सर to introduce and welcome Dr. Satish Kumar sir. Over to you, Dr. Wagmare sir, please.
Okay, good evening to all. So, it's my proud privilege and honor to introduce a great personality in the field of veterinary medicine, Dr. Satish Kumar. As you all know him, he's a well-known personality in the field of canine cardiology. So he is presently working as a professor and university head, Department of Veterinary Medicine, College of Veterinary Science, Rajendra Nagar, under P.V. Narasimha Rao, Telangana Veterinary University, Hyderabad. He has more than 22 years experience in teaching, research, and extension in the field of veterinary science. His area of specialization is canine internal medicine, special reference to canine cardiology. He has published more than 70 papers in national and international journals. He guided many MVC and PhD students, and he has attended many conferences and presented more than 30 papers in national and international symposia and conventions and conferences. He is a recipient of many awards. So I especially mention Indian Society of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. D.C. Blood Gold Medal, Dr. P.K. Das Gold Medal in the Small Animal Medicine, Young Scientist Award from Indian Society for Veterinary Medicine, and University Meritorious Teacher Award, many Best Poster and Oral Presentation Awards. So he has developed a specialized skill in non-invasive diagnostic techniques such as electrocardiography, echocardiography, ultrasonography, and organized many international workshops and many national conferences. So I welcome Dr. Satish Kumar, and I invite him to deliver a lecture on advances in diagnosis and management of cardiac diseases in dogs. So Dr. Satish Kumar, please. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your nice introduction. So nice of you all. And it's my pleasure to be a part of this program here. So I just share my presentation now and then start presentation.
Yes, sir.
So I think the slide is visible and my voice is clear.
Yes, sir.
All right. So all the participants, good evening. And before we start and before we proceed with the topic, I congratulate all the team that is involved in this today's evening presentation, particularly the team of Postgraduate Institute of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Akola, for taking up this issue and taking up this training program during this pandemic situation. Congratulate all the team. And the topic assigned for me is on cardiac diseases, their diagnosis and the management. Okay, so we'll be talking about my talk always, and I emphasize mostly on the practical aspects of any topic that is given to me. In the same way, we'll be talking and we'll be discussing about the practical aspects of the cardiac diseases, how to diagnose, and what is the managemental issues associated with that. Rather than I just very least go into the theory component, but mostly I concentrate on the practical aspects of these cardiac diseases. I just want all the participants to know this. Well, to go with the veterinary cardiology, I just want to just figure out where the actual human cardiology and animal cardiology is located. See, if you think of the human cardiology, that is the most richest area in human medicine, and that is the most wanted area in human medicine. And this is all just because the value that is given to the human life, and probably that difference. And the second thing is veterinary is always a secondary profession. Veterinary is always considered as a secondary profession. So that is the reason why any state government or anywhere, the veterinary profession is not on par with the human medicine. In the same way, the cardiology itself. And if you look at the human cardiology, once again, they have started with the stethoscope and they reached up to many milestones. And now they are in a position where they can transplant the heart. And that is the scenario of human medicine. But when we look at the veterinary aspect of the cardiology, though it has started a few decades ago and not seen in many of the other institutes, but it is establishing slowly in certain pioneer institutes. And yes, we can say that we are still in a primitive stage, but it all depends upon the facilities and that are available and the financials that is given to the institution and the technology that is available with the institution. And all these factors actually play a role in development of any area. I mean, I specifically concentrate and say about these are the lacunae that reason why we are still in a primitive stage as far as the veterinary cardiology is concerned. And I can proudly say that still, though we are in a primitive stage, but we are doing miracles, and probably a very few institutes I can say, but still we are working and we are developing, and one day definitely we'll reach to the level of the human cardiology. So why I have taken the cardiac diseases, why the topic was given and why the topic was chosen. I just want to say that the veterinary cardiology or the cardiology area is actually a neglected area during the college days or during the student academic curriculum. The more emphasis is given to food animals and more emphasis is given to production diseases, infectious diseases, which actually are directly, indirectly involved with the farmer economy. Of course, cardiology is also one of the area which actually being affecting to the other group of animals or livestock including, but that area is not given much importance. And this is very commonly given emphasis for pet animal practice rather than the large animal practice. So I can say that is the reason why the cardiology area is neglected area. So I just want to focus on those neglected areas and emphasize on what actually we all missed during our college days. So yes, coming to the scenario of veterinary cardiology, I mean to say that from now onwards, it is not the veterinary cardiology, but from now onwards, I mean, it is about the cardiac diseases in dogs and cats, probably the pet animals and the companion animals. So if you look at the census, if you look at the literature, it says that cardiac disease or the heart failure is the second most common cause for death in dogs. And this is one of the most important causes for mortality in geriatric dogs. And the incidence will be very much high and will be reaching about 70 to 80% in those dogs which has crossed their 7 or 8 years of age. So if any adult dog is presented to hospital, I mean to say that there is a possibility of occurrence of cardiac disease. And this possibility probably may be of 75% when compared to the other organ involvement. So this is a very important area and very important organ that gets affected, particularly in geriatric dogs. So when the dogs are presented to the hospital, when a dog is presented to the hospital or when it is presented to a cardiologist or a doctor or a veterinarian, so that may be seen at any of these stages. It is based upon the manifestations with which the dog is presented to you. And based on these manifestations, the heart failure or the heart disease can be categorized in these various categories. Let's see. If the dog is presented with general checkup, presented for a general checkup, but there are no absolutely any manifestations. But if the dog belongs to a certain group of breeds like Doberman, or Cocker Spaniel, or German Shepherd, or any other heavy breed like Great Dane or Boxer, Bulldog. So these are the certain dogs which are actually a breed which has got certain predisposition towards the occurrence of the cardiac disease. So when these dogs are presented to you, presented to a vet or a clinician, irrespective of the age and irrespective of the manifestations, it is very much important to monitor and check and go through the various protocols to find out whether there is any presence of the signs or the pathology of the cardiac disease. So we can say all these group of dogs, all this breed of dogs, they are considered as stage A cardiac failure cases, though there are no cardiac symptoms. And what we have is stage B. In this stage, dogs are presented for general checkup, but we'll be listening to a murmur. That is an incidental finding. So again, here there is no manifestation, there are no visual signs, but when you auscultate, you'll come across a murmur. So when such dog is gone for a chest X-ray, you may or may not notice changes in the morphology of the heart. That means there can be either enlarged heart or may not be an enlarged heart. So this is the stage 2. That means there is a murmur. That means there is a pathology, underlying pathology, but probably may not have that compensatory status to make any changes in the morphology of the heart or contour of the heart. So you don't find any change in the size and the shape of the heart, but it is showing some pathology because of the valvular insufficiency. So these group of dogs comes under stage 2. And what we have is stage C, and this is a very clear case of a heart disease patient that is presented with specific manifestations related to the heart disease. Okay, and where treatment is advised. And we have a stage 4 there. This is an advanced cardiac disease patient. This is presented to the hospital maybe as a first time or maybe a subsequent during the process of the treatment as a repeated visits. But here the treatment may not be giving satisfactory results. So this is what we call it as a stage 4. So this staging is done based upon the manifestations exhibited by the dogs. And what we have is like based upon these these signs, we can classify these heart failure cases as class 1, class 2, 3, or 4. Class 1 cases where the manifestations or the findings or the abnormalities are found incidentally. So we call them as an asymptomatic case, but abnormalities are detected upon routine diagnosis. And the second stage are also called as class 2. Here, normally the dogs are absolutely normal at rest. And even with the mild exercise, they don't show manifestations, but when they're given strenuous exercise, but when they're given any vigorous exercise, they start showing the manifestation. So this class is called class 2 or second class. And what we have is the third class, where the manifestations are noticed immediately, even with the mild exercise. And class 4, which is an advanced stage where the dog will be uncomfortable at all stages, at all times. It is very much uncomfortable while standing, while sitting. And these dogs, I'll show one of the few videos. These dogs, they don't lie down, they don't sleep even, and they will be just standing for days together. So like this, we can classify the cardiac disease severity. So this, what we call as the clinical diagnosis. So based on the clinical manifestations, we can make up this diagnosis. And this, I mean to say, when wherever the diagnostic facilities are not available, where X-ray facility is not available, where ultrasonography is not available, then the practitioner or the clinician or the cardiologist can make his diagnosis based upon these criteria. And now moving on to the systematic approach of diagnosis of cardiac diseases. This is based upon, like any other disease condition, we will be going through the history, observation, and various other diagnostic protocol and various other diagnostic modalities, what we'll be looking here. So we'll be discussing one by one about this, but I'm not going to talk about ECG, because this ECG will be dealt in detail by our next speaker, Dr. Walhankar sir. Okay, so what we will be learning about with the history, when the dog is presented to a clinician at the hospital, and the owner comes and complains that my dog is not taking food, this is a common manifestation. But here, these dogs that are suspected for a cardiac disease or suspected for a cardiac history is something different. The owner comes and complains that my dog is not sleeping, that my dog has become weak, that my dog is not comfortable while sitting, the breathing problem, or we can say that he is not having maybe a normal appetite. Okay, so these are some of the points which the owner comes and complains. And any vet, actually, it is unusual if he suspects a cardiac disease based upon the history. So this is the basic drawback for a cardiac disease, that is to be suspected based upon this history. So the history and the manifestations pertaining to the cardiac disease are very much inappropriate. I mean, like, they are not specific to a cardiac disease. So most of the cases, they go unnoticed, or most of the cases, they are misdiagnosed based upon this history and non-specific manifestations. But still, if we concentrate, we can able to make miracles by going up to the diagnosis and treating the case successfully. When coming to the observation, what is to be observed? We have to observe the body condition score. And here, the cardiac disease in veterinary patients is something entirely different to that of the human patients. So when we talk about cardiac disease in human patients, and the most important predisposing factor for a cardiac disease in human is their physical appearance. That means the cardiac diseases are more commonly noticed in those humans who are obese, maybe due to for several reasons. But here, poor creature, the pet or the dog, which is lean, is more prone for a cardiac disease. So in other words, I can say the dog suffering with a cardiac disease will always be a lean dog rather than being a obese dog, except in few other cases. Coming to the breathing, yes, this is very much important. If you look at the breathing, this is one of the primary change that the owner will notice and they will complain with. So this is what is called as dyspnea, and this dyspnea is entirely different from that of the panting. So as a clinician, we should differentiate panting, should be ruled out panting from the dyspnea. So this dyspnea should be not during the physical exercise or the physical activity, but it should be always at rest even. So what is dyspnea is like the dog will have an open mouth, protruding tongue, and sometimes the tongue may be cyanotic or pale. And look at the nostrils. Nostrils are completely dilated, opened up, Okay, and exophthalmic appearance, protruding eyeballs, and what you call is like a fearsome expression on the face. So these are the specific things that we should observe for to confirm that it is a dyspnea rather than a panting. Then coming to the next observation, what we as an examiner we should do is regarding his energy levels. So always remember, when the patient suffers with a cardiac disease, what actually is going to happen is there is a decreased cardiac output, irrespective of the complaint, irrespective of the cause. Ultimately, the cardiac output will go down, and because there is a decreased cardiac output, there is decreased energy supplied to the entire body. And this is what actually it is resulting in very much low levels of energy, which is reflected as exercise intolerance. That means the dogs, they are not tolerant to go for exercise. There is decreased physical activity. So this is a very much important manifestation and observation that we should carry out when the dog is presented for a suspected cardiac disease. Next is the mucosa. Yes, look at this mucosa. The mucosa will be very pale mucosa. And this pale mucosa, again, it correlates with the decreased cardiac output. But sometimes, in some cases, there can be cyanotic mucosa. So if the dog is presented with this cyanotic mucosa, this should be taken up immediately on emergency basis and oxygen to be supplemented, rather than taking up a case that is presented with anemic or pale mucosa. The next is pulse. The pulse, yes. I'm sorry to say this point here. I don't know how many of the present practitioners or the vets, they're practicing to check the pulse. But while we were in our student days, we used to do the pulse with each and every case. But as the stage advances, as the knowledge advances, and as the position gets advanced, and as your experience get advanced, we usually forget those minimal things, basic things. But that is a very much important point for us to remember while going for a cardiac evaluation. And here we have a specific pattern of locating pulse. We have to auscultate the heart and simultaneously look for the pulse. So normally the pulse and the heartbeat should coincide, and it should be a split second later the heartbeat. And the intensity of the pulse should vary with the breathing, and it varies with the diastolic and systolic phases of the heartbeat. So this happens normally when there is no heartbeat, but when there is when there is no cardiac disease. But when there is a cardiac disease, we can experience a specific type of pulse, what is called as pulsus paradoxus. So this pulsus paradoxus is a very important point for us to remember while suspecting for a cardiac disease. Next is jugular vein. Of course, this may not be with each and every case, but when the dog is suffering with a right-hearted failure, when it is present with a right heart failure, there is a distended jugular vein. But the disadvantage with the dogs is like there is very much of fur which is actually covering the jugular vein. So we cannot clearly identify whether there is a distension of the jugular vein or whether there is a pulsation of the jugular vein. So in that case, whenever you suspect a cardiac disease, it is always important for us to, mandatory for us to go through the jugular vein, just clip the hair there and check for the jugular vein. So in cases where the dog is suffering with a right heart failure, we can encounter a dog that is presented with a distended jugular vein. So this is an interesting finding and very much important and specific finding to confirm a right heart failure. And of course, edema, this is also related to right heart failure. So dogs that are presented with ascites may be sometimes having a cardiac disease. So we all know that the ascites may be due to involvement of liver, kidney, or a heart. So it may be a hepatogenic ascites or a renal ascites or a cardiogenic ascites. So in order to rule out the cardiogenic ascites, we have to go for the cardiac checkup. Well, yeah, that's all what we have been discussing about the diagnostic protocol. One is the history collection, the next one is the clinical observations, which is a primary information that is required for us to move forward for the advanced diagnostic techniques. So now we'll be looking into two important non-invasive diagnostic facilities, which actually confirm your suspicion that has occurred during the history collection and your clinical observation. So when we talk about the acquired cardiac diseases, there are three different types of acquired cardiac diseases. That may be the disease affecting the myocardium, disease affecting the pericardium, and the disease affecting the valves. So among the diseases of myocardium, the most important disease what we have is the dilated cardiomyopathy. Of course, we have a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, we have a restrictive cardiomyopathy, but commonly occurring is the dilated cardiomyopathy. And coming to the valvular disease, what we have is prolapse of the valves, or it may be degenerative valves. Okay, so, and the third one is the pericardial disease. So now we'll be talking about how these important specific diseases which are responsible for the heart failure can be diagnosed based upon these diagnostic facilities and how they can be managed also. So the first one is, as I was talking about, it is the dilated cardiomyopathy. This disease is one of the important diseases for the heart failure, commonly occurring in dogs. And it is very much commonly noticed in medium-sized to large-sized breeds like boxers, bulldogs, Great Dane, Doberman, etc. But one or two toy breed dogs like Cocker Spaniel is also susceptible for this dilated cardiomyopathy. So please remember, when a Doberman dog is presented, or whenever a Cocker Spaniel is presented, or a boxer is presented, or a bulldog is presented, at certain point of time, maybe like after 5 or 6 years of age, please make sure to have a thorough cardiac checkup, because these are the dogs which are vulnerable for these cardiac diseases. Then, this is how the heart that is affected with the dilated cardiomyopathy is different from that of a normal heart. So this is nothing but a dilatation of the heart we notice with the dilated cardiomyopathy. So it is primarily a myocardial disease, and because of this involvement of the myocardium, the heart becomes grossly dilated. So externally, morphologically, it looks like the heart is dilated, a bigger size. But actually what happened inside is there is thinning of the myocardium. Most importantly, there will be thinning of the interventricular septum that is present between the left and right ventricles. And there will be atrophy of the papillary muscles, and there is fibrosis of the endocardial layer that is present. And all this happens when there is a degeneration of the myocardium. So this will result in externally a dilated heart, but internally, when you look into the myocardium becomes completely degenerated and thereby become very much weak. So this heart, when the dilated cardiomyopathy heart is present in a dog during its function, it results in impaired systolic activity. So there is impaired systolic function. As a result of this impaired systolic function, the cardiac output decreases. That means what is called as incomplete or improper cardiac output. So this again happens because of poor myocardial contractility. I just want all of you to imagine a heart with a normal size of myocardium, but when the myocardium becomes thin, it expands completely but fails to contract because of poor myocardial contractility, and as a result of which the cardiac output declines. So when there is a decreased cardiac output, these are all the manifestations we expect. So remember, whenever there is a cardiac disease, maybe a myocardial or valvular or pericardial effusion, So ultimately, there is a decreased cardiac output. So when there is a decreased cardiac output, energy levels will go down and the dog is presented with any of these manifestations. But I just want you, all of you, to recollect, you might have come across all the dogs that are presented with any of these manifestations. Maybe the dog is weak, maybe the dog is having a respiratory distress, maybe the dog is having a cough, or maybe an ascites dog, or maybe a pale dog, or going down in dog, conditioning dog. These manifestations, or though they are giving a suspicion towards a cardiac disease, but at that point, when we are sitting in a clinician chair, all these manifestations, they resemble to some other specific disease, like a respiratory disease, maybe any blood loss disease, or maybe a nutritional deficiency, or maybe a liver or a kidney disease. So my point of stressing out this point every time is that the manifestations, what we expect in a cardiac patient, are entirely non-specific. So this is the major criteria why most of the cardiac patients are going misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. In more severe cases, this is how the patients are presented with, or this is how the dogs will be presented, where they are very much reluctant to lie down, and they'll be just standing like that for days together. Okay, so they can't sleep, they can't even sit, so they become completely sleepless like this for days together. Okay, so these are dogs that are presented that was diagnosed for a dilated cardiomyopathy with extreme severe complaint. So when these patients are presented in that situation, after auscultation, our next method of approach is chest X-ray. Okay, so chest X-ray, what we can able to find on chest X-ray is like, we'll be looking at the heart. We can see this is the heart, cardiac still heart. Okay, and this is the trachea, and this is the carina, and this is the caudal lobe and the cranial lobe. So what is important for us to look here is like the trachea, it is elevated, it is unparalleled with the spine. This is one interesting feature we suspect and we come across when a dog is presented with a cardiac disease. And this is nothing but cardiomegaly. The heart is extremely dilated, and this is how a dilated cardiomyopathic heart is presented with. So apart from this, we can also see pulmonary congestion. Okay, so these are some of the findings in X-ray, where we can also see an inverted D appearance of the heart on VD, ventrodorsal view. So when you come across these findings in an X-ray, this is nothing but a clear case of heart failure, and probably, I mean, to say that probably it can be a dilated cardiomyopathy. My sincere request is like, we cannot exactly say that this can be what type of disease that the dog is presented with or suffering with. It may be a dilated cardiomyopathy, it may be pericardial effusion, or it may be a valvular disease. But for that confirmation, we have to go for an echocardiography. But looking at these changes, we can say that yes, there is definitely a cardiac disease, and the dog may end up with a heart failure if it is not treated. Okay. Yes. Grossly, if you look at these X-rays, grossly, it looks very clear that there is a dilatation of heart. But as we have a different breeds of dogs, we have a toy breed, like we have a miniature dogs, and we have an extremely bigger dogs like Saint Bernard, and we have a Great Dane, and we have in-between dogs like Doberman, and we have a brachycephalic breeds like boxers, bulldogs, and pugs. So if you just look at the gross findings of the X-ray, sometimes there is a possibility to come up with an error. So if, knowing the name of the breed is very much important to assess the cardiac size, to assess the heart size. So for this reason, we have another method to confirm whether there is really dilatation of heart is present or not. So if you look at this, if you look at here, the heart, if you look at the shape of the heart here, this is almost round, lying here down. And, this looks like a typically different shape of the heart compared to this heart. But we don't know whether this dog is suffering with a cardiac disease, or whether there is a cardiac dilatation, or whether there is a cardiomegaly with this dog or not. So to confirm that, what we have is, we have a methodology to find out the vertebral heart score. We call it shortly as VHS. So here what we do is, like, we make we draw a line starting from the carina. This is the carina where the trachea is divided into two major bronchi. So we draw a straight line towards the long section of the heart, and you take a cross section of the heart at the exactly maximum width of the heart. So these two lines, after drawing the two lines, measure the length of these two lines, okay, and draw the same length of these lines starting from the anterior border of the fourth thoracic vertebrae. This is the anterior border of the fourth thoracic vertebrae. From here, you draw backwards the length of, suppose if it is a 4 centimeters, draw a 4 centimeters line from the fourth thoracic vertebrae anterior border, okay, cranial border. And similarly, if it is of 6 centimeters, draw 6 centimeters back. And now count the number of vertebrae that are present within this line. Say, for example, if you count with the blue line, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the vertebrae. And if you count from the yellow line, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe here some half. Okay, now if we count the number of vertebrae that falls within these two lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and half. And okay, 11 and half is the VHS of this dog. So if you look at the normal values of the normal range of VHS is 8.5 to 10.5. If the dog's VHS score is 8.5 to 10.5, we say it is normal. If it is more than 10.5, we say it is a cardiomegaly. And we say that it is, it could be a dilated cardiomyopathy. So this is a very accurate and specific means of diagnosing dilated cardiomyopathy or cardiomegaly in general. And coming to the next component is echocardiography. And this echocardiography, we have different modes: B mode, M mode, color Doppler, and of course, a newer area of echocardiography is bubble contrast echocardiography. Okay. So here the echocardiography, it works with the principle that the echo waves, they travel from the probe, they enter, they reach the organ, they hit the organ, and they come back, and that is displayed on the monitor as an image of that particular organ. So we have a B mode image, we call it as a brightness mode. Depending upon the difference in the brightness contrast, we say that we diagnose the pathology. And the second mode is M mode, the motion mode. We'll be just going through one after the other. So if you look at here, this is how a dilated cardiomyopathy echocardiographic image will appear. So this is the left ventricle, and this is the left atrium, and this is the mitral valve, and this is the right side, right? This is the pulmonary artery, and this is the right ventricle atrium, and this is the right ventricle and tricuspid valve. So this is how a B mode image will look like. So also you concentrate here. Look at this is the left atrium, and this is the left ventricle. Actually, there's no much difference between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So this is how the internal dimension or the internal diameter of the heart becomes so much dilated. And these two are the B mode short axis views. So here the heart is cross section to left ventricle. So the left ventricle lumen will look like almost round with maximum dilatation. And these are the M mode images. This is very much important for us to assess these two findings, which is called as the ejection fraction and the fractional shortening. So here the ejection fraction and the fractional shortening. So based on these findings, based on these two parameters, we can study the prognosis of the case, and we can also study the therapeutic outcome of the case that is diagnosed for cardiac disease. And this is a color Doppler image where we can see a multiple color, the mosaic pattern that confirms there is as regurgitation. And this is a pulse wave Doppler, which is also called as a turbulence jet appearance, which confirms the valvular insufficiency. So if you look at these videos, it will be very clear for you to understand. So this is how a B mode echocardiogram will give us the left atrium here and the left ventricle. Look at the contractility of the myocardium of the left ventricle, the systolic phase. There is a very weak systole, and this is what is called as systolic insufficiency. What you call the systole is incomplete. So when the heart is contracting, or when the systolic phase is of this extent, so it fails to push the blood out completely, thereby the amount of blood that is present within the heart remains there itself. So resulting in increased volume overload. And similarly, this is how a color Doppler image or color Doppler will work and will help us to understand, yes, there is a regurgitation of the blood that is manifested as a turbulence or the mosaic pattern appearance. So based on these two findings, we can say that there is systolic dysfunction, there is a dilatation of the left ventricle, and there is thinning of the interventricular septum, and there is decreased cardiac output, and there is valvular insufficiency, and there is regurgitation. So all these findings put together will add up and will affect on the ejection fraction, which will go down less than 40, 50, and sometimes in very severe cases, it will reach up to 20. And fractional shortening, instead of having a 20, 25, it will go down less than 20, 15, or even 10. So depending upon these two factors, we can confirm that the dog is suffering with a dilated cardiomyopathy associated congestive heart failure. So the prognosis is assessed based upon the parameters of the ejection fraction and the fractional shortening. Yeah, and this is another case, echocardiography, where we can see a dilated right ventricle. This is the right atrium here, and the tricuspid wall, and this is the right ventricle. So this is a case where the dog is diagnosed for right heart failure. So the DCM can be either a left heart DCM, dilated left heart DCM, or it can be a right heart DCM. But in very rare cases, that can be a biventricular involvement and what we call as a biventricular dilated cardiomyopathy. So this case is specifically right-sided heart failure or the right DCM case. Then coming to the next part is the valvular disease. Yes, this valvular disease, I can say that this is the most commonly occurring cardiac disease rather than the dilated cardiomyopathy. About 70 to 80% of the cases of the cardiac disease are valvular disease, and the rest 25 to 30% of the cardiac diseases are dilated cardiomyopathy or pericardial effusion or something else. So these valvular disease again may occur in aged dogs. They are seen in geriatric patients, and these valvular diseases are quite commonly noticed as a degenerative disease. Okay, so there are many valves that are present in the heart. The valves may be atrioventricular valve, that can be a mitral or tricuspid valve, or this valve can be an aortic valve or the pulmonary valve. So though we have multiple valves in a heart, so the valvular disease, if you talk about the valvular disease, the mitral valve is very commonly affected. So when we talk about a valvular disease, it invariably reflects the disease of the mitral valve, unless and until it is specified as any specific valve. So just like the structural changes that we have seen in dilated cardiomyopathy, here also there will be degenerative changes that happen in cardiotendenate, and the degenerative changes, they occur in the collagen matrix of the mitral valve. The normal elastic tissue is replaced by fibrous collagen matrix, and thereby degenerative changes that happen on the mitral valve. So based on these pathological changes that are happening in the mitral valve at its cellular level, the mitral valve disease are also called as degenerative mitral valve disease, which is the most common mitral valve disease that happen in geriatric patients. So here, because of this mitral valve disease, there is incomplete closure of the mitral valves during the systolic phase. And because of this incomplete closure, there is backflow of the blood. And this backflow of the blood is called as the regurgitation. So this regurgitation impairs complete cardiac output. Again, it leads to a decreased cardiac output. So when these patients, they are presented, they present with, no doubt, with routine manifestations like what we have seen with dilated cardiomyopathy. But we have a specific sign here. This is nothing but a cough. So it is presented as a coughing dog. And again, this cough is something characteristic. The cough is always a dry cough. Very rarely it is a productive cough. And this cough is usually ignited when the dog is present, given any physical activity, or when the dog is undergoing any physical activity, during exercise or galloping, running, jumping, etc. And most importantly, this cough is nocturnal cough. Most of the times during the daytime, they have absolute normal life, but when they sleep, when they go to sleep, particularly during the second half of the night, midnight to early morning, these dogs are presented with cough. And if any dog that is presented with this a bit of history, we can suspect that there could be a mitral valve disease with that coughing dog. So to rule out that, what we have is stethoscope for us to find out the presence of any murmur. So we can diagnose murmurs by proper auscultation, and this auscultation can be done on from left side or from the right side. If you are specifically going for a specific valve, you can auscultate it from the left between third, fourth, or fifth intercostal spaces for specific valves like pulmonary valve, aortic valve, and the mitral valve, and on the right side for the tricuspid valve. So we may encounter a murmur. If a murmur is auscultated, the next step for us to is chest X-ray. So here, again, this chest X-ray is almost similar to that of the DCM, what we have seen. Look at the trachea. This is elevated, almost parallel to the spine. Almost it is also parallel to the spine. Look at the shape of the heart. It is also grossly dilated. Okay, but what is important is this one. This is the auricle, but this is the left auricle. And the left auricle, the left atrium is dilated. So the dogs that are suffering with mitral valve disease or a degenerative mitral valve will have a secondary dilatation of the left atrium. So this is what is called as an atrial bulge or the auricular bulge. And because of this left atrial bulge, the tip of the trachea is elevated up and almost touching to the spine. So this is actually responsible for the cough that the dog is presenting with when it is suffering with a mitral valve disease. So after this chest X-ray, if our confirmation is not yet completely carried out, and if we have the facility to go for echocardiography, no doubt we have a beautiful confirmatory procedures here. So if you look at this echocardiography, previously what we have seen is the dilatation of the left atrium and the left ventricle with very feeble contraction of the interventricular septum. In this case, we have to concentrate on this area, looking at the mitral valve. So if you just look at the mitral valve, these valves, there is degeneration and there is fibrosis. And looking at the mitral valve, the closure and the opening pattern is something weird. Yeah, you just see it here. they are just directing towards into the left atrium rather than closing in this way. So this is what is called as prolapse, or this is because of the degeneration of the mitral valve. Okay, so when such dog is subjected for a color Doppler, so here you can see this. Okay, so here you can see the mosaic pattern appearance. There is mixing up of colors and there is gushing of blood from left ventricle to the left atrium during every systole. So when there is a systole, the mitral valves are supposed to close completely and the blood should enter into the aorta and the pulmonary vein of the artery and the pulmonary blood should enter into the aorta and also the pulmonary artery from the right side of the heart. So instead of that, because of the improper and incomplete closure of the mitral valve, blood gushes back into the left atrium through that incomplete closed mitral valves. So this is called as regurgitation, and this regurgitation will give us a murmur. Okay, so these are some of the images. Yeah, you just look at here. This is what is called as the prolapse of the mitral valve, and look at the size of the left atrium and that of the left ventricle. So there is dilated left atrium, and the mitral valves, they prolapse into the left atrium, and there is incomplete closure. And most importantly, look at this. There is hyperactivity of the interventricular septum. Okay, and the contractions of the systolic phase is exaggerated, what we call as an exaggerated or hyperkinetic interventricular septum. It is just because to push the blood completely out, because the blood is not pushing out through the aorta, a portion of the blood is going into the atrium. So in order to push the complete fraction of the blood, so the ventricle, the myocardium of the ventricles, they contract extensively, giving us this exaggerated myocardial contractility. And this is one of the measurement for us to measure the left atrium, the dilatation of the size of the left atrium. And these are the specific turbulence appearance that we notice whenever there is Doppler mechanics. Yeah, and the next component is pericardial effusion. The third portion or the third cardiac area is the pericardial effusion. And this pericardial effusion will arise either due to neoplasia of the heart, or may also occur whenever there is idiopathic reasons. So of these two reasons, neoplasia are very common cause for the pericardial effusion. And this neoplasia can be either, the tumor can be either hemangiosarcoma, or it can be either a heart-based tumor. So these are the two different types of tumors that are responsible for the pericardial effusion. And the manifestations, again, these manifestations are not going to be something different from that of those two what we have seen so far, but the severity of the manifestations depends upon the location of the lesions, because one of the mass like hemangiosarcomas, they are present in the right atrium, and other type of tumors, they are present at the base of the aorta. So depending upon the structures that are involved, the severity or the clinical manifestations, they differ. But in very severe cases of pericardial effusion, they will end up with cardiac tamponade, and the cardiac tamponade will cause a sudden cardiac arrest. So X-rays, again, if you look at this X-ray, this is what the cardiac cell heart, and look at the size of the heart. This is extremely dilated heart. So we may be confused with dilated cardiomyopathy, but look at the angle the trachea is with a certain angle. Of course, here it is elevated parallel to the spine. So we may have a case that is presented, we may have a case with the elevated trachea or maybe a trachea with an angle. Continue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure.
Right. Okay, so this is how a pericardial effusion heart will look like, and they're almost similar to that of your previous X-rays, what you have seen for dilated cardiomyopathy. But here, if you concentrate very clearly, we can see that the heart, I mean, the color of this heart contour will be more brighter. It looks like as if there is a fluid within inside. That means like we have a brighter heart because of the pericardial fluid that is present. We call this as a ground glass appearance. Normally, we say this ground glass appearance for X-rays of ascites cases. So similar kind of brighter image, and moreover, more round of shape. Okay, so we call this heart as an big heart, or we call this as a Valentine heart because of a bigger size of heart. So this will be extremely bigger than that of the dilated cardiomyopathy heart. So this is how the pericardial effusion X-ray will be seen. And when this case is again presented for subjected for.
Take second.
Okay, so this is another X-ray that is showing here. If you look at here, so if you look at this X-ray, we can see a cardiac cell heart here, but there is an extra mass that is present here. This is called as a tumor. This is a tumor. Because of its anatomical location, we can say that this is a heart-based tumor. So when this case is subjected for echocardiography, we can see look at this. This is the left atrium, and this is the left ventricle and the tricuspid wall. This is all the mass. This is all the soft tissue echogenic texture that is present at the myocardium of the heart. So this is how a tumor is depicted. This is how a tumor can be diagnosed based upon your X-ray. So in this case, there is pericardial effusion. This is the Anno-Kirk line that is present here, the black space. That is all the pericardial effusion that is present as a result of tumor, the heart. And we have a few more videos related to the pericardial effusion. So I hope you have seen and differentiating the echocardiographic features of the dilated cardiomyopathy, where there is very feeble systolic contractions. And if you look at the same thing in mitral valve insufficiency, there are exaggerated contractions along with abnormality with the mitral valve and dilated left atrium. Okay, so here this is very much interesting case of pericardial effusion. This is the heart and this is the fluid that is accumulated within the pericardial sac. So this pericardial fluid, because they create a negative pressure on the heart myocardium, there is diastolic dysfunction here. The heart fails to diastole completely and thereby causing a diastolic dysfunction. You can see that if you observe it very clearly. I'll just repeat the video again. So this is the right atrium, this is the right ventricle, and this is the left heart. So always when there is a pericardial effusion, there is failure of the right heart and there is diastolic dysfunction of the right heart. Okay, you can see this, how it is collapsing and it is unable to completely have its diastolic phase. So when the heart is presented to this stage, we call that as cardiac tamponade. This is another case. Yes, you can appreciate that here. You can see the right heart, which is collapsed. This is the left heart here below. And the top one is the right heart, which is not having a rhythmic diastolic phase, reflecting a diastolic dysfunction here. So this is typically how it looks like. Now this is the diastolic phase, the right heart, and this is the left heart. But this is again a diastolic phase of the left heart, and look at the diastole activity of the right atrium. The right atrium is completely collapsed. This is what is called as diastolic dysfunction, and this stage what we call as the cardiac tamponade. So if you look at the images, yes, this is the collapsed right atrium here, the depression showing, and the anechoic area, the black colored area surrounding the heart within the pericardial sac. This is nothing but the pericardial fluid or the effusion. So this is all the pericardial effusion around the heart. So this is the right heart above and the left heart. So again, here in this image, you can see at the arrowhead where there is depression of the right atrial myocardium. Okay, so this is how echocardiography differentiates the dilated cardiomyopathy. It differentiates the dilated cardiomyopathy of left and the right side heart origin, and it differentiates the valvular disease, whether it is a degenerative valves or the collapse of the valves or the tearing of the valves. And we can differentiate the presence of mass, a tumor within the pericardium sac or in and around the heart. And we can differentiate the presence of pericardial effusion. Yes, and it also helps us to differentiate whether that fluid is a pericardial fluid or whether it is a pericardial effusion or a pleural effusion. Now comes how to differentiate the pericardial effusion from that of the pleural effusion. Of course, in a video, it looks like as if there is some amount of fluid within the thorax and around the heart. And sometimes there may be a diastolic dysfunction in both the phases, in both the pleural and pericardial effusion. But to clearly differentiate the pericardial effusion from that of the pleural effusion, this is one interesting point for us to remember. This is the anechoic area, is the pericardium around the heart. And you can see this is all the pericardium and the pericardial fluid here that is present. Okay, and here what we have is one structure. Here we can see a round structure, and here you can see the round structure. And these structures, they are nothing but the descending aorta. Okay, if this anechoic space or if this black colored fluid that is accumulating within the pericardial sac, if it is on par with or above this ascending aorta, that is the pericardial effusion. If it is below that, that is the pleural effusion. Okay, so we have to identify this descending aorta and to differentiate the pericardial effusion from that of the pleural effusion. So if the fluid is above that descending aorta, that is pericardial effusion. If it is below that, that is ascitic fluid. Okay, then coming to the next advancement in echocardiography is contrast echocardiography, which is also called as an enhanced echocardiography, because that will improve the echocardiographic resolution. And this also provides a real-time movement of the blood within the cardiac structures. So yes, this is very much important for the diagnosis of congenital abnormalities like septal defects, or maybe it is also associated to diagnose abnormalities of persistent foramen ovale. And most importantly, of course, these two things we can also diagnose based upon a simple echocardiography, but more specific diagnosis is related to its shunting, route of shunting, like whether it is a left to right shunting or right to left shunting, because that is going to decide the fate of the prognosis of the septal defects. So actually these two, this is one important contrast, as it is mentioned as a contrast echocardiography. So what we do is like we inject a contrast dye into the bloodstream, and accordingly we do a simultaneous imaging, and thereby it gives us the contrast echocardiographic images. So we have a specific dye that can be given and used as a contrast agent, but because this dye administration may not be indicated in patients which are having impaired renal function and hepatic function, the researchers are working on another mode of going for an echocardiography, that is contrast echocardiography, which is called as a saline echocardiography. So here the normal saline is agitated to produce small micro air bubbles, and that air bubbles are injected into the jugular vein to notice the enhanced echocardiography. So this is a three-way syringe, three-way stopper, where the normal saline is taken and it is agitated between these two syringes to produce a good amount of microbubbles. And these microbubbles are injected. So here are the images where we can see this is a normal echocardiographic image, and this is a contrast echocardiography. So here, this is a septal defect. This is an atrial septal defect. So what we can identify and we can confirm that, yes, this is the atrial septal defect. But what is the advantage of this bubble contrast echocardiography? So whenever there is an atrial septal defect, there is a possibility of shunting from left to right or from right to left. So as long as there is a left to right shunting, it's not a problem. But when there is a right to left shunting, there will result in further complications. So to understand that and to understand the severity of the complications of the septal defect, this bubble contrast echocardiogram will help. So this is a normal echocardiographic image. And if you look at the same image with a contrast echocardiography, these are all the bubbles that are present here. And these bubbles, they're traveling from the pulmonary artery. They're coming from the vena cava. They enter into the right atrium, and from here it enters into the right ventricle, and they just go off. So they are not, this is the septal defect here. They are not coming into. But if you look at here very concentratively, you can see that the black portion of the image is extended into the right atrium. That means there is left to right shunting rather than right to left shunting. Okay, same thing here. This is also a bubble from the right atrium. They move into the right ventricle, but not entering into the left side of the heart. So this is the septum, atrial septum here. And this is again moving from left to right. So as long as there is left to right shunt, this confirms that the severity is not too much. But if you look at here, though there is a bit of left to right shunting, some of the bubbles, they entered into the left ventricle, and these bubbles, they entered from the septal defect from here. So it means there is right to left shunting. So to differentiate these parameters, this contrast echocardiography is being practiced in humans and not very much practiced in veterinary medicine. But this is one of the advancements of echocardiography that will come up in the near future. Then, coming to the last component of our topic is the management of heart diseases. So this management component of heart disease usually depends upon with certain goals, like it is very much important for any disease to identify the root cause and to treat it, where to get a complete success rate. And it may also happen by alleviating the clinical signs. And finally, it will help, if it helps, to improve the quality of the life. So these are the three important goals for management of cardiac disease. But when the dog is presented with a severe manifestations and when it is in a life-threatening situation, remember that it is due to the pulmonary edema that happened as secondary to that of the heart failure. So we should concentrate and try to manage this emergency situation with three of these drugs: diuretics, vasodilators, and allotropes. So these are the three important miraculous drugs that will help for improvement in case that is present in such emergency situation. Okay, we will talk in detail about what diuretics and what vasodilators and other drugs that are used in a heart failure case. Okay. But remember, the treatment does not change the underlying pathology. So whatever the medication we are giving is not, rather I can say it is just a management of that case that alleviate the manifestations and will give comfort to the dog to survive for a longer period rather than collapsing with heart failure. So these are the various drugs that are commonly practiced in the management of cardiac disease. Let's see one by one. The first and foremost important category of the drugs is the diuretics. And as we have seen that this is one of the life-saving drugs both for an emergency cardiac case and also with a stable cardiac case. So because the pulmonary edema and pulmonary congestion and accumulation and the pulmonary hypertension, all these factors, they are directly or indirectly correlated with the accumulation of fluid within the system and this cardiovascular system. So that excess fluid is eliminated out using these diuretics. And these diuretics, we have various types of diuretics like loop diuretics and thiazides or aldosterone inhibitors. So we can use either of these drugs, or in very severe conditions, if there is no response with a single drug like diuretic of furosemide, we can go for a combination of 1 or 2 diuretics. And the furosemide is one of the most commonly used diuretic that can be used either orally or intravenously, depending upon the severity. And it can also be given at 6 hours interval or 8 hours interval or 12 hours interval, depending upon the severity of the complaint that is presented with. And similarly, second option is combining 1 or 2 different types of diuretics will also help in relieving the emergency situation with which the dog is presented. The next category of the drugs is vasodilators. These drugs are also very much important next to the diuretics. These vasodilators, they act on the peripheral vasculature and they dilate either specifically the veins, or they dilate the specifically arteries, or we have a certain group of drugs which we call them as a general vasodilators like angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, which act on the complete both arteries and veins to dilate and thereby to correct the hypertension, because there will be always hypertension that is associated with cardiac patients. And these are another important, hallmark of drugs that are used in cardiac patients: renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. These drugs are called as angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. But to go in detail about that angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, it is very much important for us to understand this system. Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. A few lines about theory. This RAAS system is triggered up whenever there is a heart failure stage. So when this system is triggered up, the angiotensin is converted into angiotensin 1, and then this angiotensin 1 is further converted into angiotensin 2 with the help of angiotensin converting enzymes that are present in endothelium, vascular endothelium, more predominantly in the pulmonary vascular endothelium. This angiotensin converting enzyme receptors are now taken a very important role in the present pandemic situation. I just deviate for a minute. These angiotensin converting enzyme receptors, they are present in the lungs, and these receptors are the binding site for the spike protein of the coronavirus. So that is why it affects the lungs in the present pandemic. Okay, coming back to our continuation of the topic. So this angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. So when this angiotensin 2 is converted, it takes up a series of changes within the various organs, like it dilates the blood vessels and it increases the sympathetic tone, thereby it causes tachycardia. It causes the release of ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and thereby there is reabsorption of the fluid. And it also causes reabsorption of sodium and chloride and excretion of the potassium. So all these things put together, at the end, it results in a simple mechanism of conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 with the help of angiotensin converting enzyme. It results in the retention of sodium and calcium, water, sodium, and the chloride, and causes hypokalemia, and it also causes hypertension, and thereby it causes increased renal perfusion. So these are all the consequences and the complications that happen with the ignition of this renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So to counteract this, we have a group of drugs. So this is the reason why I just focused on this RAS system. So we have different drugs that acts at different level. We have a renin inhibitors that acts at this point where angiotensin is converted to angiotensin 1. And we have AC inhibitors. So they act on angiotensin converting enzyme itself, and thereby it blocks the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. And we have another category of drugs which are called as angiotensin receptor blockers. They act on these angiotensin receptors, and again they block the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. And we have another category of drugs which are called as aldosterone receptor agonists. They block the aldosterone receptors, and thereby aldosterone is not released. So these are the group of drugs, and the cardiologist or the clinician may choose what drug can be chosen and what drug can be given depending upon the severity of the complaint. Sometimes we can go for a combination of drugs, or we can go for either of these drugs. And the next category is cardiac glycosides. They are nothing but the positive inotropic drugs, and these drugs, they correct the rate, but they increase the contractility, and thereby the cardiac output is increased. Under that category, we have a phosphodiesterase enzyme inhibitors, which is also called as calcium sensitizer. The commonly used drug nowadays available in every pet shop is pimobendan. And we have antiarrhythmic drugs, like this is very commonly indicated when the dog is suffering with a valvular disease, and when there is extreme tachycardia. Okay, so we have a calcium channel blocker or the beta blockers under this category. And of course, we have sympathomimetic drugs, which are indicated when the dog is non-responsive to those three group of drugs, or when the dog is presented with very severe complaint, where we have dobutamine or adrenaline. And atropine sulfate is also one of the drugs which is also indicated in very severe conditions. And these are all the supplemental drugs apart from those three drugs what we have seen previously. Okay, finally, the therapeutic protocol should be tailor-made. It is not like, as we have seen a group of drugs, it doesn't mean that these are the group of drugs that can be given for each and every case that is diagnosed for a cardiac disease. So they depend upon the type of cardiac disease that is diagnosed, and depend upon the severity of the cardiac disease that is present in, and depends, maybe changing frequently depending upon our routine, treatment protocol from time to time. So this should be tailor-made. These drugs should be chosen and can be specifically given to a specific case. Okay, coming to the prognosis, this is very much important. Being a clinician, the client may ask you, what is the prognosis? What is the fate of my dog? It is very much important for us to enlighten the client that your dog's heart is not going to come back to normal, but definitely the dog will have a near normal life, and the survivability of the dog will increase, and we can assure that the dog will have definitely some time of extended lifespan. And these diseases, they are terminal always. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, sir. We will take a few questions, sir, because of
Hello.
yes, sir. We will take a few questions only. Few participants have asked certain questions. I will read for you, sir.
Sure.
First question is, why lead dogs are more susceptible to cardiac diseases?
Yeah. I just want to correct this actually. I didn't mean to say that the lean dogs are more prone for cardiac disease. I meant to say that the cardiac patients are more lean. Whenever the dog suffers with a cardiac disease, that results in cardiac cachexia condition, making the dogs to have a lean physical appearance. That's the point of saying that cardiac patients are lean always. Yes, it may also happen with obese patients, but that is in very specific conditions, like if the dog is suffering with hypothyroidism, or when there is a primary diabetes mellitus. So in those conditions, these dogs are also prone for cardiac disease. But otherwise, obese dogs are not prone for cardiac disease, but I can say that cardiac patients are not obese, rather they'll be lean.
Yes, sir. Another question he has asked regarding the how to measure the dilated cardiomyopathy on X-ray regarding the measurements, how measurements are taken on X-ray.
Yeah, that's what I have seen shown there. That is what is called as vertebral heart score or vertebral heart scale. We have to measure the heart with a specific point, as I have shown. It should be taken lengthwise. It should be taken lengthwise and also the widthwise, starting from the point of the trachea, the carina here. So we have to measure the heart length and width, and these length and width lines. For example, if the length is about 10 centimeters and the width is about 8 centimeters. So these 8 and 10 centimeters, 2 lines should be drawn at the vertebral column, starting from the cranial border of the 4th thoracic vertebrae. From there, we have to draw a line backwards, and then we have to draw the 2 lines, and then we have to count the number of vertebrae that fall within those lines. And we have to add those 2 vertebrae that comes under those 2 lines, and that gives us vertebral heart scale. So the vertebral heart scale ranging from 8.5 to 10.8, normally we say it is a normal. So if any vertebral heart score scale is more than 10.8, say it is 11.5, then we say that there is a dilated cardiomyopathy. So this is the exact means and the method to diagnose dilated cardiomyopathy. You just unmute, sir.
Yeah. Sir, how often we have to do screening for cardiac patient?
Yes, this is a very interesting question. Clients will come and ask you, yes, sir, you are diagnosed a cardiac disease, but how often I should come back? When should I come back? Yeah, this is very much important to advise the owner that these changes, the structural changes, will be little faster, quicker in case of dogs rather than the humans. So we can normally advise them to come back after once in every 3 to 4 months, or as and when the client notices any problem with the dog.